So you really, with this zero trust concept, you give the users just what they need, nothing else. You're very specific about what they can access. And here you have this, fantastic operating system to run it on, to create just a fantastic overall end user experience. One of our co-customers together, they think that this is the ultimate manageability and protection at the endpoint. I can't think of a better overall tech stack, period. That's a very large life insurance company that you guys would all know of. And then this is a very large bank that everybody knows about, which is their global CIO said, can we island that? I mean, they're going around saying this throughout the bank because they're ready to get, they're done with Citrix and they're ready to move to a different experience, and they want to empower BYO. Um, and changing this one thing, like just building a better client, changes everything. And that's really what we've done here with this technology. So with that, let me switch over to a live presentation. We'll kind of walk through some items here. All right. So I'll first show you, make sure this is the right screen here. Yeah. I'll first show you what our management console looks like. So this is Island. We have a lot of modules and features obviously built in here. One of the first things we might do is integrate with your identity provider, right? So this gets Island itself integrated with your trust model, right? Your enterprise trust model, um, which could be Okta or Entra ID or PingFed or whatever it might be. We might also want to integrate with your SIM. So we might set up integration with any of your security event managers. This entire management console that you see here can be controlled through Terraform. It can be set up with role-based access control, very specific roles, because you may have users, you may have administrators on the network side that need to configure networking configurations, or desktop managers that need to come in. So we'll get back to some of these other areas in just a minute, but I did want to point out one of them is a brand new feature called Enterprise Communications. So this, we're not talking about Slack, but we're talking about a way to get, large scale communications out to your field and out to your end users. It's a very nice way to, send data out, and then create content that you can then, have your marketing team keep current or whatever it might be. And I'll show you what that looks like from an end user perspective. And then the other very new feature is digital experience monitoring. So this has always been, a challenge for organizations is, Sally's always complaining that the system is slow, right? Going to Salesforce is slow. Something's wrong, or this internal app doesn't behave well. Well, we have digital experience monitoring now to be able to look across, all of the applications in the whole estate and try to understand, well, which one of those applications is, slower than the other. So for instance, if I look across 100% of my users, Island is able to track 100% of all interactivity to 100% of all apps. Doesn't matter if they're internal apps or SaaS apps or, privately hosted apps. We might look across this data for, 4 weeks and maybe try to ascertain, which devices are slower. We're thinking about a new hardware upgrade. Well, which devices are performing best? Which networks, which connections are performing best? And then I might look at just overall adoption across these applications. How much usage am I really getting out of this cloud storage thing we just moved to? So now we can, break this down by users and by, platforms. How many devices are using, this application? And then of course, if there ever was any type of concern around the speed or, around the performance of the application, we can break down where that time was spent. And this is really where it starts to reduce the mean time to repair for issues that do pop up across any type of application. So we can see the DNS time and the TCP handshake time and all the things that basically none of the other vendors that are even in their own space that do this can do, just because they're relegated to waiting for a piece of JavaScript to load in the browser, which happens way after a lot of these events occur. So because we are the core browser, we can start to measure the performance across everybody all the time, as it's needed. And of course, if Sally continues to, open tickets because, maybe her machine is slow, we can then drill in even to her machine and start to look at, what's going on. Does she have CPU problem? Is it memory? Is it a battery level or Wi-Fi signal or something like this that could indicate that there's an actual problem with her machine? But from an end user perspective, I'm going to show you this a couple ways. I've got a Windows machine here. I've got an iGel machine loaded up over here as well. We can take a peek at. But from an end user perspective, you don't necessarily have to run only Island. You can have Chrome, you can have Edge on the same machine. But the reality is, if I launch Edge and I try to get to my Salesforce, and maybe I try to log in with this account that I know the password to, and get authenticated here. Well, Salesforce is going to say no. You need the Island browser for that, right? So let me take you there. Let me bump you over to it, and we'll go ahead and open that up and give you that experience. And so I have a fictitious company here, JT Marlin. Notice that Island has launched, but instead of just going there, I do need to authenticate. So this is where we start to get redirected to your identity provider. So whether it's Intra ID, which is very popular, or Okta, or Duo, or PingFed, that's the login flow that you would expect to be taken to. So if I just put my credentials in here, there we go. Notice it's going to take me over to Enter ID, and I can get signed in. I'm actually already signed in. So this is what it might look like for kind of a first-time user to come in. They're going to have their homepage. All of their entitlements are here. If they want to launch their teams, here's that PWA. It's going to come up. You might notice the company logo is, emblazoned here in the background. That's because this is a browser canvas. We have control of the canvas. We can do whatever we want with the canvas. We can obviously protect the data as it's shown. We can put a help button where a help button doesn't exist. That little background image, just simple things like this. You control it all. If you don't want the chat feature, or if you don't want a button in Teams, well, you don't just call Microsoft and say, "Hey, would you mind taking off that meeting chats button? We never use it." Well, the browser can do that. We'll just take it off, right? We'll make it non-clickable. We'll put a big red X on it. Whatever you want to do, those are things that are in your control, because you now control everything going in and out, including the screen. And that also includes things like file downloads. So if I want to restrict or maybe direct folks that need to work on files, I don't want my contractors putting those files on their C drive, right? So I'm going to either redirect them to one of our preferred locations in the cloud, or maybe I deny the whole thing altogether and give them a message as to why. And of course, we can do that dynamically based on things like device posture, or the network that they're on, or the part of the world that they're coming from, those types of things. So notice I've got my Outlook over here. I've got my Teams over here. Obviously, this particular experience may not work for everybody. For instance, for those that need, Excel, the thick client Excel. There's folks that need the thick client Excel with the add-ins and those types of things. But there's a huge population of users that could use this, right? They could use this Office 365 experience of Excel. Now, this happens to be a lot less expensive. This is the F3 license for Microsoft, right? So if you're looking at your Microsoft E3 and E5 and wondering how many, where I can make some changes, this might be a good start, because this experience is great. You get an icon on the bottom of your desktop. You could pin this, to the taskbar. Obviously, you're going to get the same thing in iGel, but the reality is, this it could potentially be an alternative for a large swath of users. But I mentioned there was a network built in. And but before I do that, notice the messaging is over here. So these were the messages that I mentioned earlier. If you need to send out kind of large scale corporate messaging, we've just built that right into the homepage of the browser. If you also need to send breaking news, or some sort of an emergency breakthrough, that's always going to be on the top here, so we can alert folks of maybe a network outage, or, hey, don't open tickets for this. We know it's down, so just chill. And maybe we'll even take the icon off the desktop temporarily, so you're not tempted to go to that application, or maybe we put a big red X through it and tell you it's not available at the moment. But so anyway, this is completely customizable, but now you can see it looks and feels like a browser, right? I've got my URL bar. I have tabs up here. We just naturally know how to use it. What we've also done is we've built in within Island a fantastic ad blocker. This just comes native with the product. This works at the core of the browser. This is not a plugin. It's not an add-on. It's literally developed at the core of the Chromium code to make sure those ads don't come through. The interface indicates to the user, what mode they're in. Are they in a private browsing mode? Are they being monitored? Are they, what's being recorded? Because there are some cases where you might need to be GDPR compliant. You might need California privacy. They may be doing personal Gmail, and you don't want, a personal Gmail being observed. So, but they also might be doing corporate Gmail. So this is an example of corporate Gmail that just came up in a nice little window here. I know it's corporate because I see the logo. Um, I understand that I can only do certain things in the personal Gmail. So if I pull up personal Gmail over here, let's get a different account here. Let's go to this other account. I'll sign into this one. And these are things that are really hard to do traditionally, even inside of Citrix environments. Is we can't we can't really delineate the difference. Can't understand the difference between what's personal Gmail and corporate Gmail. And the trouble there is just because the URLs are exactly the same. So on the network, it all looks the same, right? So the best we can do is to add a header and tell Google not to send back personal Gmail. And basically, the result is you say no. You say no to your employees. You can't do personal stuff during business hours, like Instagram and Facebook and Gmail. But notice this does allow me to do it. It says, hey, this is personal browsing. This is not being monitored, but you might have different rules of what you can do, which makes sense because if I have a file here that's a super secret file and I go to insert this into my personal Gmail, well, maybe that's not permitted. Maybe I need to request access for that. And in fact, we can route them through a workflow to let them go ahead and request access to do that. And this ties directly in with your ServiceNow. It ties in with your Slack. It's a very easy mechanism for them to create a ticket instead of trying to go open a ticket somewhere else. Now, here in my corporate Gmail or whatever it might be, I could take this super secret file and upload it to this one. So notice it uploads just fine, right? Because those are two totally different zones. They're treated completely separately, when it comes to those activities.